of us to see the way India is rising. All that Sri Aurobindo had written about India so many years ago, 100 years ago, even before we were independent, he wrote. But since we chose the topic, Sri Aurobindo, a revolutionary thinker, this is not a thinker in terms of the person who thinks or a person who has written or a person who is a philosopher. Sri Aurobindo was a revolutionary from every angle. Usually उनको revolutionary nationalist बोला जाता है क्योंकि उनके काम करने का तरीका दूसरे revolutionary से थोड़ा अलग था. लेकिन उनकी life was a revolution from the very beginning. सबसे पहले अपनी ही मातृभाषा से दूर जाके बड़ा होना, अपनी मातृभूमि से दूर जाके बड़ा होना, that itself, of course, that was decided by his father. But as a student, what was he doing? अक्सर हम when we are studying ourselves, we think कि हम किस उद्देश्य से पढ़ते हैं. चाहे वो आज भी हम श्री अरविंद को पढ़ रहे हो, किसी पेपर लिखने के पर्पस से पढ़ रहे हो, या कहीं टॉक देने के पर्पस से पढ़ रहे हो, तो क्या वो उद्देश्य क्या है हमारी पढ़ाई का? हम अक्सर ये मतलब मैं ये कई बार भूल जाती हूँ कि टू शार्पन आवरसेल्व्स, टू एनलाइटन आवर ब्रेन सेल्स, क्या ये उद्देश्य है हमारे पढ़ने के? एटलीस्ट व्हेन वी वर इन स्कूल एंड कॉलेज, वर वी गिवन दिस एम कि हमें हमारा ब्रेन शार्पन करना है, हमारी एनालिटिकल कैपेसिटी शार्पन करनी है, हमारा राइट हैंड एंड लेफ्ट हैंड जो कॉग्निशन है वो हमको शार्पन करना है. हमको ये सब स्कूल में तो नहीं डेफिनेटली बताया गया, एंड ऑफ कोर्स श्री अरविंदो को भी नहीं बताया गया होगा शायद, बट द इंट्यूटिव पर्सन, द अवतारिक पर्सन दैट ही वाज, एज अ स्टूडेंट उन्होंने जो कुछ भी पढ़ाई की, एंड सिर्फ पढ़ा नहीं, सिर्फ कोर्स वर्क नहीं, वी ऑल नो दैट ही स्टडीड ऑल द यूरोपियन क्लासिक्स, सिर्फ नॉर्मल यूजुअल नॉवेल्स नहीं, बट क्लासिक्स. एंड क्लासिक्स पढ़ने से जो हमको समझ में आता है, अब जब हमको पढ़ाए गए ग्रीक क्लासिक्स या वर्जिल के क्लासिक्स एंड ऑल, आई मीन लैटिन के क्लासिक्स के बारे में थोड़ा बहुत जो बताया गया, तो ये पता चला कि फ्रॉम वेयर आर द रूट्स ऑफ दैट कल्चर, व्हाट आर द रूट्स ऑफ यूरोपियन कल्चर. Because just reading something in English literature, because he was in England and he was much more exposed to English language and literature, and as he said, I read libraries. But when he read a language like Greek and Latin, when he read French, when he read German, which is in a way, you know, still a slightly older language than English as it is considered perhaps, all those things, and the archaic English, British literature, he found the cultural roots of the European nations. So he made the best of those 14 years by acculturating him to, not only acculturating his brain, his mind, his senses towards opening up, assimilating a lot of things, but also he acculturated himself into a very different culture, जिसके बाद उनको नहीं पता था 14 साल बाद वो इंडिया आके क्या करेंगे. उनका प्लान शायद, we do not know, he might have a plan. तो ये जरूरी क्यों था और इससे क्या हुआ? मुझे याद है जब हम लोग लैंग्वेज कभी सीखने जाते थे, या मैंने कभी एक दो बार कोशिश की, तो मुझे मेरे पेरेंट्स ने भी बताया, टीचर्स ने भी बताया कि आप जब मल्टीपल लैंग्वेजेस सीखते हैं तो आपका ब्रेन शार्पन होता है, आप नए नए कल्चर्स को इम्बाइब करते हैं, बिकॉज हर लैंग्वेज इटसेल्फ इज अ कल्चर इन इटसेल्फ. कई लैंग्वेजेस में ऐसे वर्ड्स होते हैं जो हमें हिंदी में, इंग्लिश में, दूसरे लैंग्वेजेस में नहीं मिलेंगे क्योंकि वो कल्चर में ही नहीं. जैसे सीधी सी बात है, मंगलसूत्र, इसका कोई पर्यायवाची हमको इंग्लिश में नहीं मिलेगा, शायद किसी और लैंग्वेज में नहीं मिलेगा क्योंकि वो उनके कल्चर में नहीं है. सो जो हिंदी में है या जो इंडियन लैंग्वेज वर्नाक्युलर्स में है, वो चीज हमें इंग्लिश में ट्रांसलेट भी नहीं करते बनेगी, हमें उसे एज ताली या एज मंगलसूत्र या एज व्हाटएवर उसी तरह से लिखना पड़ेगा. तो इसलिए श्री अरविंद ने सिर्फ लैंग्वेज नहीं सीखे थे, उन्होंने इतने सारे कल्चर्स को आत्मसात किया था. So when we say Sri Aurobindo as a grand synthesis, जो book Dr. Reddy ने लिखी है, I mean, the more we think of that grand synthesis that Sri Aurobindo was, he was indeed, मतलब यूरोप में रहते रहते उन्होंने पूरे यूरोपियन कल्चर्स का एक सिंथेसिस अपने अंदर बना ही लिया था, बिकॉज डिविजन्स तो तब भी थे, इंग्लिश, जर्मन, फ्रेंच, लैटिन ग्रीक तो कोई पढ़ता भी नहीं था. आज तो डेफिनेटली हार्डली कोई पढ़ता होगा, क्लासिकल लैंग्वेजेस हम उन्हें बोल के अलग कर देते हैं. तो एक वो था. लेकिन जब सबसे बड़ा टर्निंग पॉइंट श्री अरविंद के लाइफ में, वी ऑल नो, was the ICS examination, and that was a deliberate choice. That the fact that he's told later that he got a dream and what he needed to do, he was guided, etc. But definitely it was a deliberate choice, going against his father's wish, going against a very, very lucrative career that was in front of him. He just refused something. So that was a revolutionary step that he had taken. There could not have been, he could have really taken that job आराम से एक चेयर पे बैठ के कितने ही हजारों रुपए कमा के he would have lived a very wonderful life. But the turning point that he took in his life was not to sit for the ICS. Then when he came to India and Baroda, and what the next step when he was assimilating Indian literature. And again, we know very well that it was not just the regional languages that he learned, the vernaculars that he learned. He started with Sanskrit. He even learned Tamil. So both Indian classical languages also he learned. So his first interaction with Sanskrit and later on with Tamil, it became, again, he got into the roots of Indian culture, because that is where our roots are found in the Vedas and the Upanishads. Later on, of course, he did a lot of other reading, translation, and the realization, etc. But all that was a preparation for the further, for a grander assimilation, for a grander synthesis. While in Baroda, again, two very revolutionary things that we find in Sri Aurobindo's life are that he never took any favors from Maharaja Sayaji Rao Gaikwad. He was writing his speeches, he was doing things for him, but he never attended those very high level, hi-fi meetings, as we say, those kind of parties and all those things. He refused. He was so upright that he could even refuse the Maharaja for not, he did not require to obey him. He was not a yes boss kind of a person who would just nod in front of his boss. And yet Maharaja had a great respect for this 21, 22, 24-year-old young man. So again, it astonishes me to think कि श्री अरबिंदो क्या थे कि वो 24 साल की उम्र में, 25 साल की उम्र में एक महाराजा उसके उनके जैसे कि बोलना चाहिए फैन बने हुए थे, कि वो उनके स्पीचेस लिखते थे और महाराजा उनको बोलते थे, उन स्पीचेस को मतलब पब्लिक में लाते थे. और जब आपको तो पता होगा, आप सब बहुत अच्छे से आपने पढ़ा है कि महाराजा ने उनको बोला भी था कि people will not believe that I have written them. And he says, in any case, the things that I have written, they will know that you have not written them, because even it's not just about the language, even the thought was his. And it's again very astonishing to read the variety of topics on which he wrote, on agriculture, on policy making, on Kashmir issue, everything that he was writing on revenue. So again, he was not restricted to one area of literature, of reading, of although he was a principal of French and English, but he was not, professor of French and English, but he was not restricted to those things. So that we see how every day he was widening in himself. Every year with every activity, he was widening himself. And as a teacher also, we all know that he never referred to those reference books, the guidebooks. And that is what was used to puzzle his students, that Sri Aurobindo is not referring to any of the guidebooks. There is nothing that he speaks is written in the guidebooks. So again, he said that, no, I do it with my intuition. I do it with my own intellect or intelligence. I don't have to refer to those things which people think of the same track. So actually what Sri Aurobindo was doing was every time taking a different stand. Every time he was treading a path which was not trodden, which was not taken by many people. And it may be said that there were many revolutionaries in India before and with Sri Aurobindo who did a lot of social work. And we need not name each one of them, but किसी ने सती प्रथा हटाई, किसी ने widow remarriage हटाया, किसी ने literacy लाई, किसी ने a lot of things, but they were still in a direction where we knew a lot of people wanted education, a lot of people wanted women's empowerment, etc., etc. But here was Sri Aurobindo who did something entirely different, entirely above the ordinary. And that's why Nalini Kant Gupta called him, Sri Aurobindo was an extraordinary phenomenon. So he was not a person, he was a phenomenon. Something that is constantly happening, something that is constantly unfolding itself. So that is what Sri Aurobindo is to us. Similarly, when we see his way of, way in the sense, the way he approached, found out a girl for himself, he married. He could have not married. Now, that is, again, he did not take a U-turn there, or maybe he did, because as a sannyasi, in the ascetic life, one does not marry. But he did choose a married life. He himself found, he did not leave that responsibility to his family members. He found the girl. And so he chose a path again of asceticism, but a married asceticism. Now, in that also, when he got into the politics slowly while being in Baroda, we all know that Sri Aurobindo was um, doing yoga in order to uplift his country. He was not doing yoga for himself. Now, that again astonishes me, because everything that we do as a human being is for ourselves. Every act that we do is whether it will give us the peace, joy, comfort, happiness, name, fame, everything. But neither Sri Aurobindo wanted any name and fame when he was a teacher, nor he wanted when he was a politician, because all that he was doing was underground. All that he was doing was not to be in the public sphere. He was brought in the public because of the Alipur jail conspiracy. So again, a person in politics, in fact, we know the politicians around us. In politics, what people do is just to get name. चाहे नाम हो चाहे बदनाम हो, उनको नाम चाहिए. So politics में लोग इसीलिए usually जाते हैं, not to serve the nation, but not to serve the country, but also to just to get their name and fame and money these days. So Sri Aurobindo, being what he was, he took to that very strong ascesis, tapasya, so that वो अपने देश को आजादी दिलवा सके. Again, a revolutionary act. Now, इस चीज में हम कह सकते हैं कि बहुत सारे सोल्स यही कर रहे थे उस दौरान. बहुत सारे सोल्स जो थे वो मातृभूमि की सुरक्षा में लगे हुए थे. बहुत सारे लोगों ने अपनी जानें गंवाई. एंड इनफैक्ट एक जगह मैं पढ़ रही थी कि that was a period when most of the revolutionaries were either themselves saints or rishis or people of that realization, or they were students or disciples of people of that realization. So imagine the kind of galaxy of people that we had who actually stood up for the country, and they made the country rise. One of the things that you all might know about Bande Mataram, when Sri Aurobindo took that as a slogan for the free and complete independence of India, was that, of course, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee had written it, had popularized, Rabindranath Tagore had kind of popularized it. But the sense of Bande Mataram, the feel of Bande Mataram, the mantra of Bande Mataram was infused into those two letters, those two words, was by Sri Aurobindo. And why we today are discussing about this personality, this phenomenon called Sri Aurobindo, is because he has somewhere captured each one of us. That phenomenon has captured each one of us in some way or the other. We feel mesmerized, we feel we can go to him, we can talk to him, we can guide him, we can take his guidance, I'm sorry. So this kind of a relationship with a person, even when he's so many years not physically here, is something. I mean, of course, people who believe in Swami Vivekananda might be going for that, but Sri Aurobindo being that phenomenon, there is always something to unravel, unfold. In fact, when we read essays on the Gita or anything that Sri Aurobindo has written on the Gita, he speaks of Gita as a bottomless sea. And he says that Gita, people have only skimmed the surface of Gita. One can go deeper and deeper and deeper, and yet a day will not come when a new commentary is not required. I mean, that is something so thrilling. Imagine the depth of Gita. That means imagine the depth of Sri Krishna that we can think of and find out. And a person who is able to say that, imagine his width and depth. So that is again very thrilling. That is very, very beautiful, and it expands our mind even towards Gita, even towards Sri Aurobindo and his writings. They are also the bottomless sea. They are also the the jewel, the mine of jewels. Sri Aurobindo even calls the Gita a mine of jewels. And what are those jewels? They have been skimmed, as Sri Aurobindo and the mother both say that Gita has not yet revealed its entire truth, and it's still revealing. And Sri Aurobindo, perhaps we have not even started skimming the surface of Sri Aurobindo's life and works because we are too close to him in history to even understand his magnanimity. So that is the extraordinary phenomenon. Now, in politics also, we were talking about politics. What was important, in fact, many times I feel that one of us should have some resources to study this evolution of politics in India. I mean, in the positive way, not the corruption and all those kind of things, but the polity that Sri Aurobindo was into. He was not into politics. So what were the strategies that he were employing to get rid of the British? When the country was willing to partner with the British in during those days, when they were ready to have a foreign governance on themselves, here was Sri Aurobindo, along with Bal Gangadhar Tilak and some Bengal revolutionaries. They put forth this agenda of Purna Swaraj. Now, and if you remember, I mean, I'm sure because many of you are from the society. Recently in Pune, one huge festival was conducted by one of the society members only, and it was a 2-day festival in which Sri Aurobindo had traveled to. I mean, 100 years ago, Sri Aurobindo had traveled to Pune at that time and lived with Bal Gangadhar Tilak. So those 2 days were historical for Pune because he went to innumerable places. Sri Aurobindo in those 2 days visited many, many, many people. They found out who are the people whom Sri Aurobindo visited while in Pune. They met Sri Aurobindo and Bal Gangadhar Tilak. They met many big stalwarts, spoke to them about Swaraj and Swadeshi and all these kind of things. And wherever there was a possibility of launching a Swadeshi seed, of launching a Swaraj seed, Sri Aurobindo went and met that person. And then on the 13th of January 1913, when he rose up this, Parvati Hill, as it is known very well, very famous known hill in Pune. He rose up to that hill and he had the darshan of the Devi in Pune, on which he has written a poem called Hilltop Temple. So again, of course, it was all celebrated in Pune this year, but that entire thing brought to light a lot of things that Sri Aurobindo did as a revolutionary on a day-to-day level. It is not just he went and gave a talk in Uttarpada or a Beaton Square or anywhere. It was not a singular talk that he was giving somewhere. Along with that talk, he was having meetings with people on end even for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and we can't even imagine the conversation he would be having, because what we come to know is that he was planting the seeds of Swarajya in each of his meetings. He was exploring the possibility of Swadeshi in each of his meetings. So big or small merchant or principal or anybody of that time, of that era, he was exploring that. So the amount of work, the groundwork that he has done, he was not, as we know him, the 40 years in his room, he was there. And some people who have charged him of saying that he was not doing anything. Of course, that is a completely different answer that he has given. But what we mean is, even on being on the ground, the kind of work that he has done as a political leader or as a nationalist leader is astonishing. Then in Alipur jail, now this is somewhere I think we sometimes need to, I mean, as youngsters, we need to learn that very nice, humne Gita pad liya, and my elders keep telling me Gita padna hai, Savitri padna hai, whatever. A lot of people I know personally who have learned Gita by heart. But what would it mean to realize the Gita? And imagine Sri Aurobindo when he wrote in his Karakahini, something so humbling, that he is able to say that my faith was shaken when I was taken to the Alipur jail. Now, हम में से कितने लोगों का faith हिल जाता है? अभी जो हमने त्रासदी देखी लास्ट 2-3 साल में, हम में से बहुत से लोग, मैं खुद पर्सनली ऐसे कुछ लोगों को जानती हूँ जिन्होंने कहा कि मदर नहीं है क्योंकि मेरे पिताजी गुजर गए इस कोरोना काल में। मैं नहीं मानती कि भगवान है, मतलब सब तरह से परीक्षा होती थी लोगों की, और हो रही है ट्रेजेडीज में, ऐसा जरूर डेफिनेटली होता है। बट Sri Aurobindo himself says that when I was taken to the Alipur jail, my faith was shaken. I questioned, why was I brought to the jail? Now, this I remember every time. It touches me every time because a yogi like Sri Aurobindo, who had already kind of launched in on that path much, ahead, like from 1906 onwards, he started having experiences. He had realized, he had seen the Devis and the, unknown force and the invisible deity and the immanent, all that he had seen. Uske baad to come to that point where still your faith can be shaken. And yet to have that unreserved surrender. And when he says that, I heard a voice which said, wait. Now, the more I read his Tales of Prison Life, the more I read Uttar Pada's speech, we feel, my God, Sri Aurobindo was so honest in even telling his own, account of what happened in the jail. And unlike all other people who lived in jail, he did not make his jail life into a solitary, boring, tiring, a very to gain sympathies. He did not capitalize it to gain sympathies. Today also, when we read any of the letters that Jawaharlal Nehru wrote to his daughter or anything, or Discovery of India, we always have that sad thing is in our mind that, oh, he was imprisoned for something, whatever it was, and in that lonely, solitary place, he was doing all this. But what did Sri Aurobindo do in that solitary prison? He had Vasudeva. He had Vasudeva as his mate. So that is again, he made that into an opportunity. So, of course, all of you might know it, but I would again and again urge for those of younger age who have not read the Tales of Prison Life, do read it. It's the most beautiful read one can have. You can actually touch Sri Aurobindo if you read that. It is that thrilling. It's that alive. When we read sometimes the Life Divine and the Synthesis or other books, we see, oh, Sri Aurobindo, that magnanimous person sitting on his green sofa, and unko hum nahi chhu sakte. So he is like, pranam karo, book padho, that's it. But when we want to know the person that Sri Aurobindo is, or the softness of the person that Sri Aurobindo is, we must read Tales of Prison Life. The humor of Sri Aurobindo in Tales of Prison Life. It's most beautiful. The first opening initial sentence in the very first 2 pages that he wrote, the wrath of the British government was that I found God. Now you see the 1 year of his imprisonment, which he could have started saying, oh, I was very sad and this and that, I was shocked. He didn't say all that. He first said that the wrath was that I found God. And then he said living in that jail was like living in an ashram, like a hermitage. So imagine the angle, the attitude that Sri Aurobindo has taken in this time of crisis. It was an acute crisis. He was the most sought after leader at that time. He was, even Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who was much senior to Sri Aurobindo, had called him, had invited him to Pune for what? So that he could ignite the people in Pune the way he did in Bengal, so that he could ignite the people in Maharashtra and Pune to stand up for Swaraj. So a senior leader calling a younger leader to ignite that fire. So already what a firebrand Sri Aurobindo was. So we can imagine him as that firebrand, as a person who has, that power in his speech, who can make a person take a sword or a gun or a pistol and stand up and leave everything. That kind of a consciousness he had even then. But then when he was taken to jail, he was shaken. And this reminds me, for a very small this thing, perhaps this happens in the life of all the great men. I am reminded always of this instance that happened in the life of Sant Tukaram. He was also extremely realized at a certain point in his life, in fact, on a very later part of his life. Out of vengeance, a lot of people had, drowned his entire books, all his books and everything, manuscripts of his Abhangas. all his Abhangas, about more than 4,000 Abhangas he had written. So they were drowned. And he was crying for 9 days. He was sitting like next to the bank of the river in which it was drowned and saying that I have loved the Lord so much. I have sung of the Lord so much. And now this is all over. My Lord has not saved my books, my songs, my Abhangas. And on the ninth day, it reappears. And then Sant Tukaram, he remembers that he got a dream a few days ago saying that your faith will be tested. But he forgets during those 9 days, he forgets. So maybe to ensure the faith, to enhance the faith, faith is tested. And this was again Sri Aurobindo, whose perhaps his faith was tested and he kept the faith being in the jail for a couple of days. And he says, within 3 days, I heard the voice of Shri Krishna telling me for what he has been brought to the jail. And after that, he had no problem. And that again, I do not know if we call it revolutionary, but the kind of surrender that Sri Aurobindo had in the jail. When he was counseling, we know that Sri Aurobindo, his mind was so developed that he could counsel his own lawyer to say what is to be spoken in the court tomorrow. So it is the lawyer would tell only what Sri Aurobindo had asked him to say. But then again, he heard a voice that you do not have to counsel your own counsels, that leave it to me, I will take care. And then, of course, we know that Chittaranjan Das, he came and what he did, all that, of course, is history. But again, the surrender. I mean, many times when we face crisis, I always feel, I mean, many times this has happened that people tell us, have faith, sab mother pe chhod do, sab mother pe chhod do. And we're like, नहीं होता है बोलने के लिए है मदर पे छोड़ दो लेकिन नहीं छूटता क्योंकि आपका दिमाग कॉन्स्टेंटली काम करता रहता है फॉर परम्यूटेशंस कॉम्बिनेशंस ये हो सकता है वो नहीं हो सकता लाइक अ सीआईडी और माइंड कीप्स वर्किंग एंड येट हम मुंह से बोलते हैं हमने मदर पे सब छोड़ दिया लेकिन एक्चुअली नहीं छोड़ते हैं बट श्री अरविंदो डिड दैट and that is again a lesson in surrender. When I read his Tales of Prison Life or Uttarpada speech, it is absolute lesson in surrender. And what one can do when one has nothing to do. That is again a problem with all of us who are, working constantly. And I get the bashing for the biggest and the longest time from all my elders is शांत बैठना सीखो. कुछ ना कुछ करते रहना जरूरी नहीं है, शांत रहना सीखो. And that is something Sri Aurobindo did at the age of whatever he was at 28, maybe that time, 28, 29. I mean, can we imagine a person of that age with that much of yogic energy made to sit in a small room, not even a place to walk? What kind of tapasya it would have needed for his body also to be in that? And for those who have not read it, you would sometimes I used to cry reading it because Sri Aurobindo said that he got one bowl and one plate, and that is all he had as his companions, he says. And that bowl he had to use as a mug for his toilet, and that toilet was cleaned only once a day. So there was no toilet for which he could go out. And imagine he learned to live with that filth, because if he wanted to pass motion or urine, that was to be done in the same solitary prison. It was there with him for the next time the person comes and changes it or cleans it. So he said, I learned to live with all that. I learned to live with hunger, because in my food, he said, more than the rice, I used to get more concord, more stones and pebbles. And he humorously tells that. I mean, you feel, my God, of these things, हमको हमारे खाने में एक कंकड़ और एक बाल आ जाता है तो हम खाना फेंक देते हैं. लेकिन यहाँ पे वो थे जो महीनों भूखे रहे होंगे शायद, क्योंकि obviously कंकड़ का खाना कोई नहीं खा सकता. So it's amazing. Even when and this lesson again he got when he was in England, because England में जब उनके फादर के पास पैसे नहीं होते थे उनको भेजने के लिए, तो उन्होंने कई रातें बिना खाना खाए गुजारी हैं. And a child of 16, 17, 15, 12 not getting to eat. Can we believe the kind of tapasya his body has been through? I mean, and still what he did with his body, he became a golden Purusha. So again, a very revolutionary thing. He didn't allow any disease to come into his body. So that was, his life till 1910. And after that, a lot of people that time, including Bal Gangadhar Tilak or other people, K.G. Deshpande, they were all into newspapers and writing and journalism. And so did Sri Aurobindo. He took that, made it into a weapon of revolutionizing the country, whether call it Bande Mataram or it's Karma Yogin or Yugantar or Karma or later on Arya. So his organ of deliverance was words. And that's what he wrote to his wife much earlier in his life, in one of his letters, that I know that there is a strength in my pen, not in this. No, I'm not going to revolutionize or I'm not going to uplift my nation with swords, but with pen. And I feel when he refers to swords, I mean, to my mind, it is coming right now, because Sri Aurobindo was very, what to say, he had studied Shivaji Maharaj's life very well. I mean, that's my assumption. I mean, we don't get any this thing. Because the kind of policies, the kind of attitude that Sri Aurobindo took, apart from Sri Krishna's Bhagavad Gita, of course, Shivaji Maharaj was also following the Bhagavad Gita. But the sword that comes to our mind the moment Sri Aurobindo speaks of it is Shivaji Maharaj. Or it's the warrior in Punjab. They were the two of his, kind of inspirations, we can say, or they were those reference points to which Sri Aurobindo would constantly go. Guru Gobind Singh. So these were the two names, and you will find repeated references to Shivaji, Guru Gobind Singh, and one more person, sometimes to other people, but these are the two. So his ideals were who? These two people. And if you have read Sri Aurobindo's poem Baji Prabhu, it is actually, you can read his agenda or his strategy of war. The strength from which he gets this, to fight for a war, the nationalistic spirit for the war. And one of the things that was most remarkable that he wrote is that the strength does not lie in XYZ person, the names that were given in the poem, but in the strength of the Bhavani is employed in the swords that we were holding. So it is, again, thing is, he's not saying, oh, it is Shivaji who is fighting, or it is Mansure who is fighting, or it's X who is fighting. It is the fight is being led by Bhavani. It's her strength which is entering. And this is again very interesting, because if you might be aware in the news that recently the sword of Shivaji Maharaj, which is in the British Royal Museum, they are asking it back for 1 year. And that sword was called Jagadamba. So there were 3 swords which Shivaji Maharaj would use is Jagadamba, Bhavani and Turja. All of them Shakti, names of various Shaktis of Durga, we can say, or Parvati. And here was Sri Aurobindo also employing the name of Bhavani everywhere. Bhavani Bharti, we know Sri Aurobindo has written. Bhavani Mandir is the dream he had. So he is also constantly employing the strength of Bhavani in all that he was doing. So what is important to understand is that there were these Bhavani worshippers, especially in the Bengal region of the country, especially. Bhavani or Kali or Durga, the mother worshippers were there, mother goddess worshippers. But here is Sri Aurobindo, who is employing those in his political life also, in the similar manner as Shivaji Maharaj did, because he was constantly going with the slogan of Jai Bhavani, Jai Shivani, or Har Har Mahadev, whatever. And Sri Aurobindo here was with Vande Mataram. So his entire agenda was the Mata, was the mother. And India was his mother for whom he was fighting. So that is, again, I mean, I find this very fascinating, because it's not the political angle only, it's a spiritual angle to the entire thing. And not angle, Sri Aurobindo's own consciousness which poured out into this. So वो एक बहुत खूबसूरत कॉम्बिनेशन हो जाता है ऑफ स्पिरिचुअलिटी एंड पॉलिटिक्स, ऑफ स्पिरिचुअलिटी एंड लीडिंग द कंट्री, ऑफ नेशनलिज्म. सो इसीलिए कई लोग इस पे रिसर्च करना चाहते हैं, कहते हैं ये स्पिरिचुअल नेशनलिज्म है. नाउ दैट्स अ टॉपिक ऑफ रिसर्च वन कैन डू, इसका मतलब क्या है, एटसेट्रा. देन now when he comes to the spiritual field after 2000, after 1910, in fact, to our surprise, his first deliberate, purposeful attempt to do anything in the yogic field was his silencing of the mind. We all know, हमको सबको पता है कि जब श्री अरविंद अलीपुर जेल से निकले, और उस समय फिर उनको जब योगी विष्णु भास्कर लेले से उनकी मुलाकात हुई, और 3 दिन में, and when Sri Aurobindo says rather in one day he silenced his mind. इसके बारे में आपको सबको एक वाकया याद होगा, जो माता जी ने श्री अरविंद के पास कोई आया था और उन्होंने कहा कि मदर को बोला कि मुझे मेरा माइंड साइलेंस करना है, यू गिव मी दैट, यू कैन गिव मी एवरीथिंग, यू गिव, डू तथास्तु एंड मेरा माइंड साइलेंस हो जाएगा. So the mother did it. And then he came to the samadhi and his mind had stopped working because intellectual mind had stopped working. He goes running back to Mother and Sri Aurobindo and says, "Oh, my mind." Sorry, samadhi wasn't there. So he comes down to their from their room and he says, "My mind is not working. Give me back my thoughts. I don't have thoughts." So Sri Aurobindo says, yeah, then in one moment, he didn't wait for the higher inspiration to come, for the intuition to come. He just blew it away. He blew away that silence, which was given to him as a prasad almost. So can you believe, I mean, हम लोग भी कई बार सोचते हैं ये बात कि अगर हमको कोई बोले कि आपको साइलेंस ऑफ माइंड गिफ्ट में मिलेगा, तो हम रियली साइलेंट रह पाएंगे? क्योंकि हमें तो थॉट्स चाहिए, हमें तो करने के लिए कुछ चाहिए ना, दिमाग में ही सही, फिजिकली ना करें तो भी दिमाग में कुछ करने के लिए चाहिए. बट ऑफ कोर्स श्री अरविंदो सेज कि वो साइलेंस को हमें कंटेन करके रखना पड़ता है, वो हम फेंक नहीं सकते. जो उस अनफॉर्चुनेट साधक ने किया होगा या उसे एक्सपेरिमेंट के तौर पे उन्होंने दिया, दैट दे ओनली वुड नो, बट ही गेव अवे दैट. श्री अरविंदो वाज द वन who achieved it in one day and kept it with him all his life. Now that was an experience which Sri Aurobindo says people take lives or at least a very, very intense tapasya of a whole lifetime to achieve. In fact, if anybody else was in his place, and if he had at all achieved silence of mind in one day, which is of course a kind of impossibility according to the yogic sciences, but if he had, he would have said तथास्तु, मेरी spiritual journey हो गई, अब मुझे इंट्यूशंस आने लगे हैं, मुझे इंस्पिरेशंस आने लगे हैं, एंड इससे ज्यादा मुझे कुछ अब करने की जरूरत नहीं है. आई कैन गो एंड प्रोनाउंस टू द वर्ल्ड कि मुझे श्री कृष्णा मेरी जीप पे बैठ के पूरे उत्तरपाड़ा स्पीच दे सकते हैं, सब कुछ कर सकते हैं. लेकिन श्री अरबिंदो ने वो नहीं अपनाया. इनफैक्ट उसके पहले भी जो उनको एक्सपीरियंसेस हुए, आपको पता होगा कि उनको ऑन द बैंक्स ऑफ नर्मदा उन्होंने काली के दर्शन किए नहीं, उनको हुए. He was just going, and those who have visited that place, they always say इतना ब्यूटीफुल लगता है कि वो हम छोटा सा मंदिर है, छोटी सी एक मूर्ति है जिसका कोई बहुत अच्छा शेप नहीं है, काली मूर्ति है, काली की मूर्ति है, महाकाली की नहीं, काली की मूर्ति है, और श्री अरबिंदो उसके सामने चल रहे थे और उनको अचानक ही से आई सॉ द गोल्डन डेटी इमर्जिंग. सो इमेजिन आज भी उस टेम्पल में कितना फोर्स होगा, एक काली का और एक श्री अरबिंदो का. सो together, I mean, it's again very enthralling if you ever get a chance to visit that place, कि उनको वो काली के दर्शन हो गए थे. उनको हिल टॉप टेम्पल जो मैं कह रही थी वो उनको हो चुका था बाय देन. उसके बाद उन्होंने कश्मीर में जो उनका अनुभव हुआ था, शंकराचार्य हिल पे श्री अरबिंदो गए थे, और उस हिल पे जो अनुभव श्री शंकराचार्य को हुआ, आप जानते हैं श्री शंकराचार्य हिमसेल्फ हैज बिकम अ ह्यूज काइंड ऑफ रिलीजन इन इंडिया. उनकी फिलॉसफी घर घर तक पहुंच गई है. उनका जगत मिथ्या का जो उनकी जो मान्यता है या उनका जो रियलाइजेशन है, वो पूरे घर घर इंडिया में हर घर में, चाहे वो अनपढ़ हो चाहे वो पढ़ा लिखा हो, वहां पहुंचा हुआ है. और हम सब ये मानते हैं कि मुक्ति ही हमारा मार्ग है, वो मुक्ति ही हमारा एम है. तो ये चीज जो श्री शंकराचार्य ने एक रेवोल्यूशन की तरह पूरी देश में फैलाई हुई है, श्री अरविंद को वो रियलाइजेशन जो श्री शंकराचार्य को हुआ, वो जस्ट यूं ही फिर शंकराचार्य हिल पे चढ़ते चढ़ते उनको वो रियलाइजेशन हो गया. ही डिडंट आस्क फॉर इट, ही डिडंट ट्राई इट. And anybody in his place would have said, wow, this is an experience and I don't want anything further. So here was Sri Aurobindo who kept on stepping up and up and up. Another thing, when he had Vishwarupa darshan of Shri Krishna in Alipur jail, when he says, Shri Krishna was, his arm was around me. I was sleeping as, when I was sleeping, the pillow was as if it was Vasudeva. The judge was Vasudeva. The bars of my prison were Vasudeva. I mean, everything was Vasudeva for him. The whole vision had changed. And I feel for any one of us, that would have been the ultimate experience. कि हमको और क्या चाहिए कि हमको हर जगह वासुदेव दिखे, इससे ऊपर हो ही क्या सकता है फॉर अस, इससे ऊपर क्या होना चाहिए या क्या हो सकता है. बट श्री अरबिंदो का एक बहुत फेमस लाइन है, which he in fact starts in one of the very early chapters of the Life Divine, and yet there is a beyond. So that, you almost stop with that sentence, because it comes as the third chapter or fourth chapter of the life divine. We think that it has come after the arguments in the first 2-3 chapters. But when you just take this sentence on its own, and yet there is a beyond, it tells us the story of Sri Aurobindo's achievements. Speaks about his spiritual journey. So Sri Aurobindo again was a revolutionary spiritual seeker. He did not stop with any one of his experience. And that is what we see in Savitri. That will come later. पर उन्होंने उन experiences को जितनी मतलब honestly उन्होंने उस चीज को express भी किया है सावित्री में, उन्होंने उस चीज को जिया है, वो poems भी express किया है, जैसे मैंने हिल टॉप टेम्पल बताई, फिर शंकराचार्य हिल पे उनको जो एक्सपीरियंस हुआ उन्होंने अद्वैत में बताया, पोएम अद्वैत में. एंड अगेन द वेरी ब्यूटीफुल थिंग इज बीइंग अ मैन ऑफ लिटरेचर, वो हर चीज को कंप्रेस करके एक छोटी से 14 लाइन की पोएम में लिखने की उनमें वो शक्ति थी. तो कभी कभी जो हमारे प्रोफेसर थे वो कहते हैं कि सावित्री आप पढ़ रहे हो, ठीक है, सावित्री तो लंबी लंबी है, उनके पोएम्स पढ़ो, उनके सोनेट्स पढ़ो, उनमें भी वो जो वाइब्रेशन है, वो जो पावर है, वो छोटा सा आइडिया कन्वे करने का. एक जगह वो लिखते हैं एटम इज द चैरियट ऑफ शिवा. नाउ जस्ट इमेजिन व्हाट डज इट मीन. ही सेज एन एटम इज द चैरियट ऑफ शिवा, and he has become one with Shiva by then. He has become one with the universal consciousness by then. He has become one with the atom by then. And then he says atom is the chariot of Shiva. It's so thrilling, it's so unimaginable to think कि कैसे हम शेरविन ने अपने इतने बड़े एक्सपीरियंस को एक लाइन में कैप्चर किया हुआ है. इनफैक्ट उनके जो पोएम्स के बारे में बात कर रही हूँ, उनको सोनेट्स बोलते हैं. आपको जो लिटरेचर के बैकग्राउंड से होंगे उनको पता होगा. 14 लाइन्स वो स्टैंडर्ड फॉर्मेट है, और उसमें ही आपका एक्सपीरियंस लिखा जाता है. Now again here is a revolutionary poet called Sri Aurobindo, क्योंकि सोनेट्स जो लिखे जाते थे आज तक, मैक्सिमम जो लिखे जाते थे, वो किसी अपनी इंटरनल फीलिंग कि मुझे किसी से दुख हो रहा है, द्वेष हो रहा है, तकलीफ हो रही है, या जैसे शेक्सपियर के सोनेट सबसे ज्यादा फेमस हो गए क्योंकि उन्होंने किसी एक डार्क लेडी के बारे में लिखा, और बहुत सारे लिखे, 83 सोनेट्स लिखे उसी डार्क लेडी के बारे में, उसके बारे में अच्छा बुरा व्हाटएवर ही रोट, बट दैट वाज हिज फीलिंग अबाउट दैट लेडी. Now Sri Aurobindo started earlier with those kind of poems where he says Rose I have seen thy face, or these kind of poems. Experiments वो कर रहे थे, लेकिन फिर उन्होंने अपने spiritual experiences इन poems में डालना शुरू किया, लिखना शुरू किया. And that again becomes revolutionary because sonnets जो हैं वो आज तक emotional level पे restricted थे या religious level पे restricted थे. Sri Aurobindo took it further forward and made it into a spiritual character. And that is why many of his poems, not only Savitri, but even his sonnets, are a future of sonnets, are a future of poetry. क्योंकि जो पोइट्री आगे लिखी जाएगी 100 साल बाद, 200 साल बाद, 500 साल बाद, हमें नहीं पता, लेकिन वो लिखी जाएगी अगेन इन अ स्पिरिचुअल मैनर, बेस्ड ऑन आवर स्पिरिचुअल एक्सपीरियंसेस, नॉट बेस्ड ऑन आवर इमोशनल एक्सपीरियंसेस, नॉट बेस्ड ऑन आवर सबकॉन्शियस एक्सपीरियंसेस कि हमें बहुत दुख हो रहा है, हमें बहुत प्रताड़ना हो रही है और हम वो लिख रहे हैं पोएम में, जो हम यूजुअली करते हैं. दैट इज व्हाट वी कॉल आवरसेल्व्स एज पोएट, कि अरे मुझे वो पेड़ को देख के इंस्पिरेशन हुई, मैंने लिख दिया. श्री अरविंद ने लिखी एक 6 या 8 लाइन की पोएम ऑन a tree, very beautiful. Again, he says the tree is like the hands seeking out for the sky. Now just imagine his vision of that tree. It is not just a beautiful tree which is looking at the sunlight and aspiring for it. That sunlight, that sun is the supramental sun, and this is the aspiration of the vegetal world, I mean, including ours, but the vegetal world. So there again, he has, every time Sri Aurobindo writes anything, even in his youngest times when he used to write, there is that beautiful spiritual element which comes in. So that is where I feel he is that spiritual revolutionary who, in his student life, as a teacher, as an employee of Maharaja, as a political leader, as a spiritual leader, spiritual master, he was a revolutionary because he did something out of ordinary. He always did something that was above the humanity and not in the same direction as the humanity might think we are going. but it was always a step higher. And that is what was revolutionary, not because he did what the world was expecting to happen. Because आज हम बोलेंगे हाँ इंडिया राइज हो रहा है, हमारा टेक्नोलॉजी बढ़ना चाहिए, that is kind of given. We know that we are a IT hub, we know that this digital India is happening, all those kind of things, certainly. But that vision who gave in so many years ago, like what the mother gave us, she said that I can visualize that a time will come when one can just take out a file just like that. And we didn't know she was referring to a computer, the computer folder and the computer file where we could just click and get the file out. She even spoke about the plastic before it was, it came into um, existence, or it came into use the way we use plastic today. And she said, I know that plastic is going to be the material of the world, but that is not going to be, she said, another material is going to come, which scientists are thinking could be silicon. So we do not know. We will have to still discover. Similarly, what Sri Aurobindo said, I mean, just going back to Sri Aurobindo, at a time when World War I and II were going on, people would not have ever thought about human unity. But here was a yogi who could envision perhaps hundreds and hundreds years ahead of his time. And there he wrote about something called ideal of human unity. He even wrote, recently a professor here, he did a wonderful research. He said that, Sri Aurobindo has given these two paths. If you're doing this is the result. If you don't do this is the result. And humanity has the freedom to go both ways. And we do go both ways. So that is where, and यूरोपियन यूनियन के बारे में हमको मालूम होगा कि यूरोपियन यूनियन का जब कॉन्सेप्ट भी नहीं था, तब श्री अरबिंदो ने यूरोपियन यूनियन के बारे में लिखा, वो कैसे फॉर्म होगा, उसके क्या स्टेप्स ऑफ फॉर्मेशन है, वो सक्सेसफुल होगा या नहीं होगा, वो सब कुछ उन्होंने लिखा. इवन लीग ऑफ नेशंस के बारे में, यूनाइटेड नेशंस ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस के बारे में, फेडरेशंस के बारे में उन्होंने वो सब लिखा था जब वर्ल्ड इसके बारे में सोच भी नहीं सकता था. The world बटा हुआ था in these allies and those countries which were fighting. So world was completely divided because of the wars. But in 1917, here was Sri Aurobindo was sitting and writing on ideal of human unity in the midst of World War I. Now that is something, again, a revolutionary thing, because how can one think of a united world when the world is so very well divided? And even now we can't think of it. The way the world is divided, we can't. But there are experiments happening. We are all here. We are all one. Even through technology, we are all one here. Aurobindo, of course, is going on an experiment with all its ups and downs. But certainly, if it's a divine dream, it has to come true. But as we said, the revolutionary thinker is an extraordinary phenomenon. And this phenomenon is somebody whom we need to rediscover and discover and associate with ourselves, our lives. If he becomes our inspiration, if he becomes a phenomenon for us, then all this talk and reading and everything would have some relevance. Because that is what I sometimes feel when I listen to my elders, them giving talks about Sri Aurobindo and the mother and their works. We feel, wow, itna acha lagta hai sunne mein, but where do we imbibe it? At the end of the day, sometimes I do get to get a good bamboo also. Ki, what is happening? Sif baat karna, padna is not enough. Where is that 1% of effort to imbibe? Be a good student, be a good teacher, be a good administrator, as something. At least those human qualities we can. Spiritual qualities perhaps are very, very far. But to culture oneself about something is something I constantly keep learning whenever I get a chance to learn from Sri Aurobindo. And it's a very long journey of many, many lives. So we must somewhere, perhaps. I mean, I don't say that I have begun, but what I'm saying is Sri Aurobindo is that wonderful, lovely inspiration. It's only how we can touch him. And I mentioned one book, Tales of Prison Life. Another book is 12 Years with Sri Aurobindo. These are two books where we literally can feel Sri Aurobindo physically. I would say literally physically. When I read these 12 years, any time of the day of my life, I read it. It's like mother mentions that Sri Aurobindo had a very soft hand. And when you read Nirod Baran writing about that, you literally feel, wow, that was Sri Aurobindo, soft spoken, soft hand, answering in only yes and no. And yet he's there as a humorous person responding to Nirod Baran and Purani ji, and all the humor that he had with Nirodha. So with that, I mean, I leave this for any question answers further if you have or comments. But thank you so much, and it was a pleasure rediscovering my own relationship with Sri Aurobindo, because it's he that the phenomena that he is, unfathomable that he is. The more we think, the more we read, the more we learn. Thank you so much.